Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the next installment of Spinnaker's on-demand webinar series. As you may be aware, this is the fifth and final webinar on Spinnaker's organizational change management approach, with previous webinars discussing Spinnaker's overall organizational change framework, followed by a discussion on organizational alignment and readiness, organizational design, training and organizational enablement, and today we will be focusing on communication.
A quick introduction for those of you that may not have viewed any of the other webinars to date. My name is Mark Smith. I'm a director in Spinnaker's Heyde consulting practice with 20 years of supply chain experience spanning business process to strategic road mapping to JDA, Oracle, and SAP implementations. Across a plethora of industries from consumer product goods to retail, as well as even automotive and some discrete manufacturing. And as you can see here, some of my sample clients where I've done work over the years. So that's just a little bit about me. So with that said, I want to first take you into Spinnaker's overall organizational change management framework. And with any type of transformation, as you can see here from this particular slide, change is composed of many different things. Whether we were talking about what is leadership saying and doing around this change, how are you aligning your resources, how might skills change based upon any type of transformation which your organization is implementing, and what is the vision of that change? How are you going to guide that elevator pitch throughout the organization and align that vision across different groups? So if you think of change management as these various different components from vision all the way through to leadership, in order for any truly project, whether you're talking supply chain or any type of human resources or financial, this is not limited purely to supply chain type work. In order for any type of implementation or business process or strategic work to be successful, change management is a key component, and all 6 of these areas from vision to leadership are key. If you have a situation where the work that you are doing, leadership is not aligned, or there is a lack of vision, or there may be the potential where you have not laid out a sound plan, or your resources are not aligned, all of these can lead to issues of confusion as to what you may want to be doing with the transformation you're instituting, lead to frustration for your resources, or it leads to a much slower and more gradual change throughout the organization. So in order to really be successful with any type of transformation, you need to ensure that from a change management perspective, you are touching upon all 6 of these areas from vision to leadership. And as such, that is really where organizational alignment and readiness come into play. Now, from a Spinnaker perspective, we envision organizational change management as being a key overlay over Spinnaker's 5 lenses implementation methodology. So Spinnaker's implementation methodology, the 5 lenses are composed of people, process, technology, policies, and metrics. And as you can see, just as with many other implementation methodologies, we actually cover off from an overall programmatic perspective, from assess all the way through to manage, or as other organizations may call it, cut over and go live, depending on the work that is being done. But overlaying that from both a programmatic perspective, how are you running the program, Spinnaker's methodology also overlays the organizational change management component, as you can see at the bottom of the graphic on the slide here. Change management is something that is key, that needs to be discussed and addressed throughout all phases of a project implementation. This morning, going into a bit more detail, if we take Spinnaker's 5 lenses approach to its implementation methodology and delve further into that organizational change management component, you can see on this slide that Spinnaker's implementation methodology is composed of 4 specific components on the OCM front: organizational alignment and readiness, organizational design, training and organizational enablement, and communication. Each of these can be done individually as a specific aspect of change management, or if it is a large project or implementation, taken together holistically. And within each of these 4 OCM components, there are different work plans or activities, tools and templates, deliverables and metrics that we have in place to help guide an organization through that overall change management process in association with any transformation work that you may be doing. If we look at it from a more higher level view, really, if it is a very large scale implementation, typically speaking, you're looking at developing a sound OCM strategy first. So what is that strategy and the scope and objectives associated with your OCM work? And then you use that to drive down into how you're going to do your alignment, design, training, and communication. So it's very similar to what I was discussing previously on the prior slide, where from an OCM strategic perspective, you need to ensure that that strategy and that vision are in place, and then use that strategy and vision and the associated scope and objectives to then drive the individual 4 components within Spinnaker's organizational change management framework. So as I have previously mentioned, our framework is composed of the 4 components.
So from a overall communication perspective, within the change management framework, this is really one of the key components that helps align the other aspects of Spinnaker's organizational change management framework, being alignment and readiness, training, and organizational design. Now, you may wonder, many organizations or groups believe that they have a strong and sound understanding of what communication is, but when it comes to the actual execution of the communication and the messaging of the communication, that is where issues tend to arise. So really, communication is focused about sharing what the vision is and the details of the upcoming change that your supply chain program or transformation or implementation may be undertaking. And it's really composed of a well-crafted strategy that you are using to align all of your employees, and you're making them aware of what this change is so that they can understand what it's about, what benefits are expected to be received. And in turn, you want to use this communication to really motivate not only team members that are part of any type of implementation team that you may have in place, but team members across the broader organization. Any type of change can be met with hesitancy, resistance, and communication is the one factor that helps break down those walls and drives the willingness to accept the change that is coming in the organization. Now, in order for any type of communication to be successful, this is where you really have to pair it with an effective set of communication tools. And as we discussed in the alignment and readiness webinar, really engaging your change agent network. Who are those individuals that are going to take your communication messages throughout the organization to make sure everybody is aligned? So as you can see here from the overall graphic, communication is the 4th component of Spinnaker's OCM framework. And like all the other aspects of the change management framework, it comes with its own specific framework and templates and the associated work products and deliverables and KPIs and so on and so forth. And some of this we'll get into as we progress through the presentation this morning. Now, like many things on or from a change management perspective, communication is all about a continuum. Communication really starts with that initial contact. So on the lower portion of the graphic there, where you are at the beginning of your process implementation or your system implementation, and it moves people along this continuum and it builds upon that initial contact to make individuals more aware, make them willing to experiment with the work or the change that is coming, and moves them on the continuum until there is actually strong acceptance and a willingness to internalize this new process and these new systems within the organization. A key call out here is you'll notice that you have your time across the bottom of the graphic, and of course time aligns with different phases of a project implementation from assess through manage. And the types of communication that you use, the messages that you may use in any communication delivered will evolve and change depending on what phase of the project you happen to be in. During the assessment phase, communications may be focused more purely on the change is coming and here's the business case for change. But when we get to actual implement and manage, the messages are probably evolving to this is how it's going to impact your role, this is how things are going to change for you, and this is what it means for the entire organization from an executional or an operational perspective. With that said, if you look at the far right-hand side, you can see we call out themes, messages, and information. So overall, any themes that are developed, those themes need to be consistent across the lifespan of the project. Those themes are a constant in the messaging that comes across, a theme being business benefits. As you progress through time, the communication you have around a business benefits theme should not change. You are going to achieve X% improvement in ROI, or you are going to achieve X% improvement in your inventory levels, or your carrying costs are going to reduce, whatever that may be. However, the way you deliver those themes in messages, those messages may change. Those messages may evolve from pure email communications. They may turn into newsletters, or as you progress through time when you're coming into that implement and manage phase, the messages become much more detailed information, and that information being this is what it means for you and for your job. And at that point, communication readily delves into training and organizational enablement and making sure that your individuals within your organization are aligned from a training perspective and that the upcoming training is communicated solidly to the individuals impacted. So communication really brings together all aspects of change management, from that initial alignment and readiness during the start of the project and assess and design, through any organizational design discussions that are probably occurring once you know what your design is and you're moving into that implementation portion of the project, and then ultimately into the training and organizational enablement, or knowledge transfer is another way to consider organizational enablement during the actual cutover or managed portion of the project. Now, in order to evolve along this communication continuum, there's a standard, a structured, targeted, prescriptive communication approach that Spinnaker likes to utilize, and we term this a theme-based message map. The theme-based message map is focused on first determining who are the stakeholder groups. So typically speaking, you would have some type of executive stakeholder group. You would have a group of individuals that are directly impacted by this supply chain transformation. You may have other groups that are indirectly impacted. So other groups in that case could be marketing and sales. Generally speaking, any type of supply chain transformation, of course, you're speaking operationally, but marketing or sales may have inputs into what that overall process is, or want to provide inputs as to, oh, we're doing a promotion with this customer in 3 months. How is what we're going to do and how we work with the supply chain group going to change based upon the new processes and transfer and systems that you may be implementing? So first, it's really about identifying what are the different types of stakeholder groups. That is the first important step in developing any type of theme-based message map. Once that is done, then you can start figuring out what are the types of delivery modes I want to use to communicate this information out to the organization. And on this particular slide, you will note we have provided some different examples. A general one, which many organizations use, of course, is the standard email. But other options, which as you consider much larger supply chain transformations, these become much more important. Another one being around team or individual meetings. Generally speaking, as you are progressing through time, you are bringing those marketing and sales groups to a group meeting where, from a communication perspective, you are providing them that business case or the business benefit that we are expecting to achieve, and this is why it's important to the marketing and sales group. Another option is your internal intranet, whether that means developing a specific landing page on the intranet associated with the project, or having a link to project documentation via SharePoint or whatever file sharing system you may have. That's another way to focus upon delivering communication messages out to the organization. And then the last two are just as important. Newsletter being typically what I have seen done and what has worked well is, this is where we're at, this is where we're going, and this is what we've achieved. So any type of newsletter communication really shares with the wider audience the journey that you're on and provides specific details as to what you've accomplished since the prior newsletter that was distributed to the organization. And lunch and learn, or snack and share, whatever term you want to use, is really focused upon bringing those groups together and providing them the forum to listen to the project team and provide them that opportunity to ask questions. So it's a more open forum where questions can be raised, issues can be asked, and if there are gaps identified, figure out how you bring that back into the project team, and then, of course, take any answers that you come up with those questions raised back through the communication process overall. Once you've determined what types of delivery modes you want, then it moves into actually developing the themes and the actual messages that are going to be used. And here you can see an example from various themes or messages. One could be around the transformation story. So it's an introduction to the project. This is what we're going to be doing. If you're working with any type of consulting partner, such as Spinnaker or any software provider, generally speaking, as part of the kickoff, there will be slides that are developed that detail out, this is really what the timeline looks like. This is where we expect key phases of the project to fall. These are key individuals involved. This is what the project governance looks like. Here's a expected RACI associated with the overall implementation. So that would be an example of a transformation story that you would want to use and deliver at the start of a project. Other transformation stories may include, once you have moved through design and you're wrapping up design, this is what we've decided on, folks. This is what the design looks like, and this is what we will begin to build in the coming weeks as part of the overall implementation. Other messages as examples here include a training plan announcement. We have now moved through design and we are coming into implement, and testing is around the corner. So now there need to start being communications around, in the next month or 6 weeks, key individuals are going to be trained. Here's an example of the training agenda. Here are the time commitments we are expecting from you. So developing sound communications on that front to ensure everybody is on board. And then depending on the type of transformation or the level of change expected throughout the organization, there could be a message or a theme based around how is your job impacted by this change. As we all know, any type of change does bring concern to individuals within the organization around, how is my role changing? How might my position evolve or potentially go away altogether? And what does that mean to me from a career path perspective? So developing the appropriate messages on that front. And then the last component is really another example is around celebrating success. What did we achieve with the cutover and go live? You heard from us at the very beginning with the project introduction. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. How did we achieve that? Did we achieve everything that we said we were going to achieve at the beginning? So your themes and messages and what you communicate at the end of the project is just as important as how you started the communication at the beginning of the project. Once you figured out what those different messages and themes are that you want to deliver, then it really moves into a communication schedule. So from a communication schedule perspective, you can see we repeat the various themes or messages identified in step 3 above. And then likewise, we have identified the stakeholder groups or the groups we identified in step 1 at the very top of the graphic. So with the transformation story, the project introduction, we have called out that all groups in this particular example will be exposed to that transformation story and will understand what the project is about. and that we will be sending this communication via 4 types of delivery mode, being numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5, which tie to the team and individual meetings, the intranet, newsletters, and the lunch and learn. And all of that is going to be executed upon in week 1 of the project. So if you have solidly built numbers 1, 2, and 3, by the time you get to the actual communication schedule or step number 4 in the scene-based message map, you have a very solid view and timeline as to what you need to communicate by when and to whom within your organization. Now, if we take the theme-based message map down to a tactical communication plan, a tactical plan is really focused on communicating very specific events and pieces of information over the course of the business transformation. And some of these I've already given you examples of. We're wrapping up design. What does design look like? Typically, another big piece of information that certain users, typically within the supply chain group, like to be aware of is when you are in testing, whether it is unit testing, where you are testing the functional capabilities of an application, whether you are talking UAT or user acceptance testing, where you are speaking about how successful were the test cases, how many errors were there, how many rejects or defects are we leaving on the table because we could not solve them, and are any of those defects high level or critical enough where we have to take a pause and we have to go back and figure something out differently from a design perspective. So those are examples that from a tactical communication plans perspective, that's the type of information that you want to be executing out within the organization. If you look at it from a pure, what are the key elements of the tactical plan, it's really figuring out what are the different pieces of communication, or what are the goals of the communication by the constituency that you want to communicate with. What is the information that wants to be shared from a message perspective? And I just gave you a few examples on that front. The target audience, to whom is this information going to be shared? And then how are we going to share it? What is that delivery mechanism? Most importantly, I find, is the messenger. Who shares this information? Again, if you have listened to the organizational alignment and readiness webinar, as well as the organizational design webinar, you will remember there was a discussion about a change agent network. Really, from a messenger perspective, this is where the change agent network is key, because these are individuals you have identified within your organization that really provide that overall guidance. They are considered the go-to people. They are considered people that basically always tell the truth and want to ensure they're doing right by the organization and the employees in the organization. So it is these type of change agents and individuals that you really want delivering the message. Typically speaking, if it is somebody in a pure C-level position delivering the message, it is not necessarily as well received as if it is a key member from the project team or a key member from the extended project team. It is these folks that once the project is done and the consulting groups roll out of there, the change agents are the ones your users and super users will be going to. So that's why from a messaging perspective, it usually works much better if it is somebody from your change agent network that delivers the overall message. So from the next aspect of a tactical communications plan is really around frequency. At the beginning of a project, you may actually only be communicating with the larger project team or the larger organization on a bi-weekly or monthly basis. But as you progress through the life of an implementation, those communications need to pick up with frequency, whether it's the communications via email or newsletter. As you are moving into testing and getting closer to cut over and go live, typically speaking, there are more town halls or lunch and learns or snack and shares. So the frequency, typically as you progress through the lifespan of a project, increases with how you communicate with your organization. The last two components from a tactical communication plan perspective is the target delivery date. So tying back to the frequency, it's really taking that frequency and applying specific weeks and sometimes days within those weeks. So in prior implementations in which I've been engaged, we knew that every Friday, as we were moving from the end of design and design sign-off, and we were moving into implement, we were actually having a newsletter email communication going out every Friday with what had been achieved during the week or the prior week. So figuring out what those delivery dates are and the associated frequency with those delivery dates is key. And then the last component is really around status, progress of the communication activity. You want to ensure that with any type of communication, there is some type of feedback loop. One thing I have not touched upon to this point, and if we think back to a prior slide where I was discussing different modes of communication, another mode could be some type of survey, whether you are using SurveyMonkey or something else that you may have internally. It's important that you get feedback on the communication that you are sharing, whether the themes and the messages that you are communicating are having relevance within the organization, and that groups within the organization truly understand what is coming. And the only way they truly understand what is coming is based on how solid the communication and the details within those messages are being communicated to the organization. If we were to look at a communication plan in detail, moving on to the next slide regarding critical success factors, really in order for any type of theme-based message map and for the tactical communication plan to be successful, there are many different critical success factors that are necessary in order to drive through a successful communication program. As I previously mentioned, a key one is being credible messages by trusted individuals. So are the change agents you've identified, are they trusted within the organization, and can they deliver a credible message? If the message is strong and sound, but you have an individual that is not well respected within the organization, the message is going to fall on deaf ears. So it's important from a success perspective that you identify appropriate individuals to deliver the messages. And most importantly, with the second point there, deliver those messages in a consistent manner across the organization. You cannot be in situations, which I'm sure many of us have faced during our careers, where certain individuals or certain executives are saying specific things about the supply chain transformation that is occurring, but you have other leadership members or other project team members that are saying something completely contradictory. It's important that as you develop your theme-based messages, that your change agents or other individuals are well trained to deliver a consistent message across the board, which ties in directly with the following key success factor around repeating and reinforcing the message over time. You have to stay the course. If you have said there's going to be a specific ROI achieved or a specific reduction in carrying costs or an expected X% improvement in forecast accuracy, or you're going to improve your merchant plans or your buys by whatever metric you decide, it's important that that message is reinforced consistently over time. Another key success factor, and I've hit upon it in the previous slides, is the delivery of the communication and using a variety of modes. Consistently sending emails, we know what happens. People will create rules when they see an email from that address, and that email just disappears into a file within their email. So as opposed to just focusing on one particular mode of communication, it's important that you develop different modes of communication and get the information out to the organization that way. Likewise, with those different modes of communication, you want to focus on the overall success of the project and how it's going to drive results within the organization. The communications, as I mentioned, should be, this is where we're at, this is where we've been, this is where we're going. And as part of that discussion, it's about what are the benefits that we've achieved to date, if there are any, or are they evolving or changing. And with that, you really want to emphasize that from a leadership perspective, that they understand what the transformation is about and they understand when the communications are coming out, and they are on board. So when you think about the organizational alignment and readiness webinar, this is really where, from a communications perspective, you are having those discussions from an alignment perspective with the leadership team and your change agent network to ensure that they understand from a communications perspective and the theme-based message map, these are the key dates you're hitting. That means 2 weeks before, leadership and change agents, we want you aligned that this is the message we're delivering. The following week, you want them to participate in training sessions, so to speak, about how to deliver this message or this communication, and then you execute on that message or communication the following week. Another key critical success factor, which I've touched upon, is the feedback loop. You need to ensure that any type of communication you're sharing with the organization is being well received, and if it is not, you take the necessary steps to refine what that message is or how that message is being delivered. And just to hit upon a couple more is really getting the feedback. When you do get that feedback, whether it's from the leadership team or the change agent network, typically it is best if those same individuals give that feedback to the organization at the next round of communications. We heard you, we heard that there are these concerns, and this is what we're doing to address your concerns. There is nothing worse than actually collecting that feedback and then not working on it or addressing it and letting individuals know that you have heard them. So in order for any communication process to work successfully with the associated messages, these are some of the key critical success factors that your organization needs to focus upon. Moving on to the following slide around a comprehensive change readiness and communication engagement model. This is really built into the overall change management and readiness approach that Spinnaker has. It's designed to really help you identify and address fears. It's designed to help provide overall accountability, and it's also designed to include the coaching. And most of these things I've already touched upon during the course of the webinar this morning. If we look at it from a delivery method or a vehicle of delivery, many of these things as well I've already touched upon, but I want to hit upon the bottom portion here around coaching in particular. Again, with the a prior webinar around training and organizational enablement. In that particular webinar, it was really focused upon the different levels of training that Spinnaker offers and the different delivery modes, deliverables, what the overall approach looks like. So we really went into a lot of detail on the actual delivery of training. Just as important with training, it ties to the communication, and that communication ties to how you coach the individuals that are going to be delivering that training. So what type of train the trainer are you going to have? How do you communicate those train the trainer sessions to the individuals? In turn, what type of job aids or how-to guides are you going to develop for the trainers that are delivering the trainer and or the individuals receiving the training? So overall, training really becomes another key component of your overall communication process. So with that said, this wraps up the fifth on-demand webinar series for Spinnaker. We have covered organizational alignment and readiness, organizational design, training and organizational enablement, and this morning communication. And then, of course, overlaying all of that was the Spinnaker change management framework. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to this last installment of our webinar series. I hope you have found them useful and fruitful. And again, if there are any questions or if there's any way that Spinnaker can assist your organization, please do let us know. Thank you very much.